Hey, everybody, it's Eddie from Tokyo. This is your cryptocurrency update from Japan, and this is a terrific conversation with the chairman of Ripple, Chris Larsen, and he's discussing the possible move of the company Ripple away from the US, along with the woefully behind situation that the United States is in comparison to China, and also the risk of losing the global stewardship. So he has this discussion with John Roberts, who is a reporter for Fortune. I'm going to let you listen to it. It's very insightful, and it's a really rare glimpse of being able to hear in depth what the chairman of the company Ripple is thinking. So here we go.
The competition between the US and China is no stranger to the media. With acquisitions, trade deals, and innovations leading the way, the fight for patents, technology, and now currencies is well on the horizon. Our next guest, Chris Larsen, chairman and co-founder of Ripple, and John Roberts, legal and crypto reporter at Fortune, will break down what this battle actually entails and insights on the way who may actually win the war.
They have a little bit of a slow start with a technical difficulty here, but it gets going quickly.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having us.
Oh, good to be here. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Sorry, a bit of a technical snafu to start, but never hurts. Anyways, welcome so much to have the co-founder of Ripple speaking live. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. They'll be relayed to me. But just to open with, Chris, what have you been up to? What's the pandemic life been like for you?
Well, I'll tell you, between the fires and the pandemic and, kids going back to school, have windows open at school and then the smoke coming in, so then they cancel the school. So, I guess like everywhere, it's been a year we all want to forget. But we've been fortunate. So.
Yeah, well, at least it's going to end soon enough. We'll have a new year, and we've also had crypto to keep us busy. So let's jump into some of that. A lot to cover here: China, patents, the future of Ripple and XRP. But let's begin with the geopolitical stuff. I know you've shared some fairly strong opinions with me on U.S.'s policy towards cryptocurrency and what other countries are doing. So what's your latest thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, I just think that the U.S. is woefully behind in kind of stepping up to what is going to be the next generation of the global financial system. We've been in this incredibly fortunate position where the U.S. has been the steward of the global system, with 20% roughly of global GDP, but the dollar makes up like 80% of all trades, probably even more than that. That is a great position to be in. It's an incredible privilege, and it has really benefited all Americans. But we are being challenged in a major way. First of all, I think we have to talk about China. I mean, we are in a tech Cold War with China, and that goes across the spectrum, whether it's, kind of communication, surveillance, big data, AI, but also blockchain and digital assets. And the reason is because China has recognized that those technologies are the keys to who's going to control the next gen financial system. And we all know that the financial system we have today, it's creaky, it's old, it's from the 70s. SWIFT and correspondent banking is not going to be the system we're going to be living with over the next, 2 decades, right? Way too slow, error prone, it's too closed off, it's too expensive. And I tell you, China is just itching to be the one that designs this next system. They've committed $1.4 trillion to a variety of technologies, and blockchain is right on the top of their list. And you go down the kind of inventory of where China is today, it's impressive. They're doing a great job. And nothing against China here. We got to admire what they've done, right? I mean, almost ubiquitous digital payments domestically, incredible numbers, right? That sets them apart from where we are. They are now way ahead on a central bank digital currency, the digital yuan. That's setting them up now to help spread the yuan globally. Huge advantage there. They control mining. All the proof of work mining is controlled by China. If you look at Bitcoin mining, it's about 65% is controlled by Chinese miners. I mean, come on, does anybody have any question that a Chinese miner is under the control of the Chinese Communist Party? No way, absolutely not. And miners are masters, right? They can rewrite history if they want. They can block transactions. So huge advantage, and if they recognize that, incredible. And then you also got to recognize the move in Hong Kong now gives China 2 of the 5 global financial centers. The U.S. only has 1, New York. They have Shanghai and Hong Kong now. So that sets up a pretty nice picture for the power that they're going to have in designing the next gen system. Compare to that where the U.S. is, we don't have the digital dollar, right? Even though folks like Christian Carlo have recommended that. We need to get on top of that. We need to do a much better job of capital markets, regulators, Silicon Valley-like cities, not just Silicon Valley, Austin, many other places, working together like they do in so many other countries. And then finally, I just have to say it, in the U.S., all things blockchain, digital currency, they started and with the SEC. And, we got to give SEC credit. They faced a terrible ICO problem in 2017. It was needed to be stopped. They stopped it, and they should be admired for that. But that war has finished. And now we're in this tech Cold War with China. And instead of pivoting to encouraging U.S. innovation to keep up, they've done the opposite. They gave Bitcoin and Ethereum a pass, proof of work systems that benefits China, weirdly. But everything else is still in limbo, or worse, kind of being regulated through enforcement. And the message there is blockchain digital currencies are not welcome in the U.S. If you want to be in this business, you probably should be going somewhere else. To be honest with you, we're even looking at relocating our headquarters to a much more friendly jurisdiction. Lots of them, UK, Switzerland, Singapore, Japan, and that's a shame. So we've got to change up here, or we're going to lose our leadership, stewardship of the global financial system. That would be a tragedy for the U.S. And I don't want to go too long on this, but one thing just to think about, if China controls the next-gen financial system, that's an illiberal democracy financial system. You could expect things like social credit scores to determine who's going to be able to make a payment. It's like as far away as the vision of digital assets, blockchain, as you could possibly get. It's a worst case scenario, and it would be really terrible for Americans.
That's a lot to unpack, Chris, and especially what you said about Ripple possibly relocating. I want to come back to that in a second, but first, the broader themes you're talking about. I think especially with the digital dollar, my understanding, I've heard from a lot of smart people, that the great game is to displace the greenback as the globe's reserve currency, which is currently an enormous strategic advantage to the U.S. I've heard even Europe is trying to craft its own version of a kind of central bank currency as part of the thing to rely less on the U.S. dollar. Surely in Washington, there's a lot of people who know exactly what's going on and the sort of existential threat this poses to American prosperity. So what is going on in Washington? I mean, why is there such a kind of a logjam? Is it simply lack of interest? Is it, we're seeing some progress. Brian Brooks' work at the OCC seems to be carrying the flag for crypto and new payment systems, but yet we seem to be in the same place. What's going on? Will it change if there's a Biden administration?
Yeah. So I know that people in Washington understand the incredible privilege that the U.S. has and the advantage, the strength from a national security point of view, not just economic. So I think people recognize that. There might be a little bit of, I think, maybe complacency of, hey, the odds of that happening are low. We fought, the euro successfully. We fought the yen successfully 2 decades ago. So this isn't going to happen. But honestly, even if it's a small percentage of a risk, this should be all hands on deck because the consequences are so high. So I don't think that's quite resonated yet. We also really haven't realized that the China of today is different than China even 5 years ago. So I think even many regulators are still in maybe a mode of, hey, we can work with China. We were partners. We should be partners. And I believe eventually we will get back to being partners. And that's a great thing for the world. But that's not where it is today. Right now, China is threatening the power that the U.S. has in these cases. So I think we are starting to wake up to that, but it hasn't resonated throughout the U.S. government, and that's a problem. The U.S. government is pretty decentralized in a way, right? So we need to get back on it. I think if we do get a Biden administration, I do think it will get better. I mean, frankly, I don't think the posture that you see at the SEC today can possibly get worse for this industry, because it really is, it's a posture of crush it and push it away. And that's just the wrong approach. I think the Biden administration will be aware of where China is. The weird thing is the Trump administration has been fantastic on China. I'm a huge supporter of the position we've taken. And folks like Senator Cotton, fantastic on the issue, right? He's really focused on that. The interesting thing is, so is Chuck Schumer. And when you get a combination of Senator Cotton and Senator Schumer together, I like both of them, that's powerful. So I do think that you very likely could go into a better posture towards China. And I also think a Biden administration is going to be another kind of thing that might affect our industry. They're obviously going to be a lot more focused on climate. We should expect there's going to be carbon pricing. That probably then hurts proof of work based systems when you consider, Bitcoin produces about 400 pounds of CO2 per transaction. That's enormous. You had a $70 per ton price on carbon. That's probably where we're going. That's about a $15, kind of fee per transaction on proof of work. So that gets interesting. That actually might spur more innovation because it would loosen up the weird kind of embrace of Bitcoin and Ethereum over all other things. So that's probably a good dynamic, but we'll have to see.
Right, and a couple of questions have come in for me on my Twitter feed about Ripple's own relationships in Washington or the SEC. What you said a moment ago about possibly leaving the U.S. Has there been new developments with your relationships with the SEC in Washington, and what's the latest on that front?
Well, I just think the whole tenor continues to be one of frustration that we don't have more clarity and we don't have more of a pro-U.S. approach. Ripple has been a U.S.-based company. About 430 employees. We paid hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. taxes, and we are setting the stage for future leadership. The U.S. would be in a great position going forward, right? And if you look at some of the banks and partners that we've signed up in the products that we produce as a company, that includes some very strong U.S. allies. Japan, for example. Brazil, for example, the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia and the UAE, great relations there. And then those flows into Southeast Asia, making great strides in Africa, which is a huge kind of disputed territory, if you will, between this struggle between the U.S. and China. We've got to win there. So all of those things add up to a very strong kind of pro-U.S. technology invented here, good for the U.S. It's perplexing that we don't have more clarity, but look, the world's moving quickly, and if there are other jurisdictions that are going to embrace this, we've got to look at those. The other thing I think we have to do, and as a call to action to the industry, is I think everybody who's in this industry in the U.S., we've got to help support some of these legislatures. Emmers, Conaway, who's retiring, but his bill hopefully moves forward. Soto, McHenry, Ro Khanna. There is a group developing in Congress, I think, that's trying to take the mantle and maybe provide the clarity legislatively that we don't have from the regulators. And that would be a very good development. I think that might be the only path forward. So we'll definitely work on that. But in the absence of a change, I think every U.S. company happy in this space has to look at relocating, frankly. Yeah,
I want to go back, explore Ripple's operations more in a second, but tell me about this potential relocation. I mean, we've seen the long arm of the U.S. financial enforcement bodies are powerful. They seem to be able to get, punish people anywhere in the world. So would that really deliver you? Would you really be able to escape such regulation? And where would you go? You mentioned London or Singapore. Are those most likely destinations?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't know how it's going to exactly play out, but those centers are trying to be sort of the fintech centers of the world. You have clarity in places like Switzerland, the UK, Singapore, Japan. And by the way, they're all in open arms, right? I mean, just about anywhere you look in the world, given the economic situation, wants jobs, wants future wealth created in their countries. Of course, we still have huge numbers of employees in the U.S., but I think you have to look at who is going to be your chief regulator. The thing that's interesting about some of those locations is you have this advantage of having the capital markets, the regulators, and the innovators all in the same city. That actually really helps. This is actually a huge problem in the U.S. when it comes to fintech, because you've got the three key domains in completely different places. They don't interact. They don't understand each other. I think a lot of times in Washington, the regulators look down, for example, on folks in Silicon Valley. They just don't get it, don't want to get it. That's a problem. So, again, my hope is that the U.S. gets back on track, but it's pretty late in the game. We're falling way behind.
Makes sense. Well, let's turn to kind of a hopefully more positive stuff. Tell us what's new with Ripple. I've got questions. Is there more bank partnerships in the offering? And what's the latest with the XRP Ledger Foundation? Or this is two separate questions.
Yeah, we continue to make really good progress. Again, the product that Ripple, the company, has is around enterprise blockchain. Our belief is that you're rewiring the world. This sort of Internet of Value is going to replace the current system that we have, and that's a way more efficient. You're moving now value instantly, securely. Basically, it's very low cost, and it's open to everybody. But we think that starts with the banks, because the banks already have the hundreds of millions of customers, the wallet providers. Think of Bcash, for example, in Bangladesh, over 35 million wallets for folks that otherwise didn't have bank accounts. So it's all these financial institutions that carry with them enormous numbers of consumers around the world, and bring all the other infrastructure that's not changing here. The custody relationships, the security relationships, the AML. So we think that's a good approach to quickly grow, these kind of new networks. And we have about 300 financial institutions on board using RippleNet. You got about 24 that are using ODL. It's an additional product which provides huge benefits in terms of liquidity costs for those providers, and we think those two things go hand in hand with each other. So we're making really good progress, on those key elements, and we'll continue to do that all around the world. The thing is, the network gets more and more valuable the more institutions you bring on, because you're getting endpoints now all over the world, and those are getting thicker and thicker and thicker. So we're really happy with the way that's going.
And what about someone else asking? Ripple's traditionally focused on enterprise customers, banks and big institutions, but with the MoneyGram tie-up, that seems to be more of a consumer-focused play. What's the strategy now? Are you still sort of pursuing both those fronts, or how's the MoneyGram experiment worked out?
Yeah, no, definitely both of those. The MoneyGram, though, is enterprise, right? We're trying to help them be more efficient in all of the things that they do. So we like that approach. Again, I've been in consumer fintech businesses before my last two companies. The thing that I took away from that was, as you get closer and closer to the consumer, you're doing more and more things that actually aren't changing with the technology. So, you start off one day as an engineering-focused company, and then before you know it, 95% of what you do is customer support, customer marketing. We don't want to do that, right? Because we think there's some fundamental things that are changing with blockchain and digital assets around how money moves around the world instantly. There's a lot of things that actually are perfectly, they work perfectly well. And, you look at a company like MoneyGram, kind of almost impossible to replicate, all of the legs they have to get to that last mile. We don't want to recreate the world. We actually think that slows down progress in the business. So kind of building it through the enterprise, we think, is a way of short-circuiting the growth of how these networks happen. And then you sort of have the groundwork for new players, like the Bcashes of the world, these digital wallets in particular, to sort of easily hop on and then have this sort of network all around the world. So we think that's the right approach.
Got a question about Ripple and the Bank of England. I know MasterCard recently announced sort of a tie-up with central banks. They're going to provide a sandbox for them to experiment with digital currencies. What's Ripple's relationships right now with the Bank of England or other central banks or the Fed?
So we spent a lot of time over the years in very productive dialogue. Central banks have been actually terrific. It's so funny when I think this whole cryptocurrency thing began, everybody said, well, the central banks are going to be your worst enemies. In fact, I think they've been among the most constructive sort of financial regulators out there, maybe because they're dominated by economists, right? So that's actually been really, really constructive. So the Bank of England has been terrific. They really kind of leaned in early on this whole space. The Fed has been great. The authorities in Singapore and Japan have been terrific. But, when it comes to central bank digital currencies, we think there's a place for both the central bank digital currencies and the decentralized digital currencies. They're different things, right? The beauty of the decentralized digital currencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, for example, is they move value with just pure economics, right? They're policy free. They don't bring the political elements along with the value. Whereas a central bank digital currency, and I'm not criticizing this, it's just saying this is just an absolute truth. It moves value and policy and politics along the way. So it becomes very difficult to kind of integrate two CBDCs together with not just the economics, which is simple and policy free, but it's the political elements that become kind of more challenging. So whether that be in China, where you're going to have maybe social credit scores, capital controls, all completely, that's great. That's their rules. How is that going to mesh with other things? So you need a decentralized digital currency. It's kind of that, interpreter between those. We think that's a great role and why these decentralized digital currencies are going to be so important in the digitized global economy that we're all in and that will only increasingly become so.
Well, XRP is decentralized, as you say. Does that preclude Ripple from acting as an advisor or a consultant to the central banks, given its expertise? Or if you do that, do you risk sort of being, seen as XRP's overlord?
No, I don't think so at all. Again, keep in mind, most of what, if you look at the XRP ledger, XRP, the decentralized digital currency, most of what happens in that ecosystem is really correlated with Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's like 100 billion trading per year, let's say. The vast majority is connected with what's happening in the overall market and is being driven by kind of all the things that drive Bitcoin and Ethereum. Is it store of value? Is it maybe just kind of holding it as something that will be valuable in a digitized, globalized future? Is it speculation? That's just kind of all happening in its own kind of economic reality, completely separate from what Ripple is focused on. If you look at ODL, it's over the last 2 years about $2 billion. So it's a tiny fraction of the overall experience that's happening in those markets. So I think Ripple, the company, we just look at how do you have product market fit? So if there's product market fit with a central bank that wants to explore digital currencies, absolutely we'll be involved. It's just a different thing, but we think a valuable thing. We think every central bank should be having discussions about a digital currency, and particularly with the speed at which China has embraced it. The rest of the major economies, they sort of have to at this point to stay relevant and stay ahead. Kind of one final point on that, kind of one central bank digital currency can be so different from another one, not just the kind of the currency behind it, but again, what are they going to let it be used for? The most radical would be consumers can go directly to their central bank. That's probably such a radical step to be cutting out the banks. I just don't see that happening. So it's probably some form of working with banks, maybe wallets. There's going to be a lot of gradation on what you can actually do with it that will drive, its impact on the world.
Related question, someone's asking about Libra and Facebook's very ambitious project. Where does Libra fit in? Is it somewhat similar to what you're describing as a sort of parallel private currency? Do you regard it as an ally, a frenemy, a competitor? What, if any, interaction is there between the XRP crowd and what David Marcus is building at Libra?
Yeah, first of all, David Marks, he's a great guy, so super impressed with him. I think at this point, maybe they set out to be kind of a global currency. Obviously, the regulatory pushback was so strong. And frankly, maybe you could even trace some of the approach in the U.S. government, kind of the souring on the space, maybe to those hearings. I think that was probably a setback, right, as you're kind of getting out of the ICO problems, and then that sort of cropped up. So probably was a net negative for the industry. But I think where they're going now, and I want to speak for them, but it seems like, it just makes sense. It's sort of a competitor to WeChat. It's another PayPal. It's another network that now has a payment mechanism inside of it. Well, you're still going to need then that interoperability to every other payment network. That's the way we kind of see the world. And that's the way we see a big part of the value of decentralized digital currencies. And there'll be that interoperability glue that can help mesh one thing of value in one network to another thing of value in a different network. So I think net on net, it's good to see more networks have kind of value tools inside of them.
Makes a lot of sense. I have a few minutes left, but I want to pivot to patents. Someone on Twitter feed has shared a screenshot of a lot of the patents that Ripple is seeking. China's been aggressive with that. So where's all this going? I mean, I know with the smartphones, there's horrible litigation across the globe between Samsung and Apple over, smartphone technology. Are we heading for something similar with blockchain?
Well, I think you have two kind of elements going on. Obviously, at the protocol levels, anybody that's working on protocols, they one need to be open, which is the most open licensing kind of rules that you can possibly have. So people shouldn't be seeking patents on those kinds of things. And you've seen some mixing up of that in the early days. It seems like that's kind of settled down. And then, of course, on the application layer, where the bloody battles, the competition is going to be fought. And there, I think, again, those are more, it's like comparing IP to Facebook, right? So again, at the lowest level, that's totally open. At the highest level, yeah, it's just business as usual, fighting out all kinds of battles, and the patent battlefield is just another fighting area, frankly.
Interesting. We've got someone asking if Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse manicures his own beard. You have to have
Well, during the pandemic, that's a really good question. So I'll pass on that one, but I'll pass it on.
That's fine, actually. That's not my last question. My last question, also from someone on Twitter, is where's Ripple and XRP going to be in 2 years? So take us into the future a bit. So we're in 2020, only for another month, thank God. Where is Ripple and XRP going to be in 2022, 2023?
Well, let me speak for Ripple. It's kind of a continuation of all the things we're doing to build out RippleNet. There's still a lot of territory to cover, and within the customers that sort of brought on, going deeper and deeper with those customers to increase those transaction volumes and the utility of that network. As far as again, XRP, I think is more tied with Bitcoin and Ethereum and the general market as anything else. It's anybody's guess on where I won't even kind of venture an estimate on that. There's so many issues at play. But again, stepping way back, to me, the idea of a way of moving value globally, securely, instantly, that's kind of a fix for what's wrong with globalization. We've talked about this a lot. Globalization hasn't worked, and I think the missing link has been the ability to move value like data, and that's really what these things are all about. So my hope is that gets stronger and stronger, and it's our job to sort of help make that happen.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. Always fascinating to speak with you, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.